and I'll kick it off. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Facebook Live chat about the MS Plus Carers strategy. I'm really excited about this strategy as it reflects our organisation's commitment to supporting the people who provide the love and care for people living with MS. We know that the support crews are vital to people with MS, and we would I'd really like to acknowledge that as part of the organisation. So I'd like to welcome the people who are here on the chat with me today. We have Kim Repcak. Kim is one of our peer support coordinators who's been deeply involved in supporting the carers strategy. And Kim is deeply involved in carers in part of her everyday work through supporting the carers peer groups. I'd also like to welcome Bridie, and Bridie is a carer who supports her husband living with MS, and Bridie also was deeply involved in the strategy, in the development of the strategy, sharing her experience, her insights and her wisdoms. And I would also like to welcome Linda Rowley. Linda was a very valued partner in the development of our carers strategy. Linda was engaged with MS Plus to design and facilitate the project of the development of the carers strategy. Linda's experience and qualifications were perfect for the approach that we wanted to take, which was to deeply understand the carers' needs and by hearing their voices. Linda has worked with an extraordinary diverse group of people across different workplaces, community groups, private groups, organisation and government sectors. So brought all those amazing skills to being able to look at how we can best create a strategy that will be sustainable and be able to really reflect the needs of the unique group of carers who look after people with MS. So Linda, I just wanted to welcome you today. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'd love you to talk us through how the process that you and the approach that you took to developing the carers strategy for MS Plus.
Thanks so much, Jodi, for inviting me on today. I'm delighted to be here. So the approach we took was really around co-development in relation to the strategy, both with MS Plus, so yourself as well as the carers. So we had a reference group of carers who were quite diverse in terms of living in kind of regional versus metro areas. We had carers that lived in 3 states, so primarily Victoria, but also New South Wales and Tasmania. And we had some younger carers as well as some carers who are a little more senior, as well as carers who worked and didn't work. So we brought a range of people together, all carers of people with MS, to look at what the barriers were to living well for them, what the opportunities were for living well, and what support they might need to do that. So that was kind of the first part. We had the reference group who helped to guide the development of the strategy and the process around the strategy. We then developed a survey which was sent broadly to carers of people with MS. We had 249 responses, which, as we've talked about, was a fantastic response to the survey. And we were able then to drill down and really get granular with some of the information from the survey through facilitating focus groups and also through one-on-one interviews with carers, which were primarily telephone-based. And again, of course, we had touch points with the reference group all the way through that who were guiding us through the process.
Great. And I think just from reading all that was a really rich source of data that was collected. So there was a lot of information, there was lots of sharing of wisdoms and a lot of experiences. So I guess it's easy to get lost in all the data. But was there themes that emerged for you across the groups, across the ways and across the survey?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a number of key themes, and we found that these key themes really came out across the broad range of carers. So they might have had slightly different focus, but the key themes, some of the really interesting or surprising things that came out were that, almost 70% of carers are people with MS. it had impacted their work in some way. So they'd either given up work, they'd reduced their hours, or they'd taken on a role that had, less stress and responsibility to be able to accommodate, their role as a carer. So that was I think quite a big thing that impacted a large proportion of carers. We also found that a large proportion of carers, their social life was impacted. So carers, some of the themes were just not having time for themselves. That was probably the main key theme. And also the key theme around then not having time to maintain their social contacts. And what a number of carers told us was that they actually felt quite alone and quite isolated. And that was particularly true for carers who were younger and perhaps didn't have the peer kind of friendships that they were able to, talk to and disclose around what was happening for them and get that support. So, some people spoke about always feeling like they needed to be the strong one. And not having that support that they really needed or required. Other key themes were around, not being able to access information when they needed it. So at the right time for them, whatever that happened to be. And whether that was around, a crisis or situation that had arisen for the person with MS, or whether that was just ongoing as part of their, MS. I'm not sure if you call it a journey, but, as life, with someone who has MS.
I think that's for people living with MS diagnosed so young, and the age group is 20 to 40 diagnosis. I think that impact on work is something, when we think of carers, we often think in the aged population, and it's quite different for people who are younger living with MS, and there's so many competing needs, often younger families, that sort of comes into it. So I can imagine that isolation of not only the impact on work, but all these things that need to be done. And I think lots of people, because of age bracket and the link that we often make carers and aged people, that people with MS who provide support to people don't necessarily identify as carers. It's not. And often if you say to someone, well, you kind of are a carer because you're doing a lot of supporting, you're doing a lot of love, and this has come into your life now as a friendship. Even a lot of friendships take on different roles, and they have different things they need to do, and people wouldn't have seen that. So one thing that we really wanted to capture, that you sort of brought out in all that research as well too, that there's different needs, but also that there's lots of people who give love and support, who may not think of themselves in that traditional version of a carer, but very much fit into needing that extra bit, and fit into having their well-being impacted and their lives impacted by that. And so that's something that I guess that really where that self-compassion, that I know that you is something that you feel strongly about, that need for carers to have self-compassion. Did you find that theme was in when you were talking with carers, that theme came out as well too?
Yeah, so certainly I think one of the things that came out is that, yes, a lot of people don't identify as being a carer, as you've said, Jodi, and also some people who are in a caring role really find feelings of guilt or, for instance, that might come up if they take time out for themselves. So, or being hard on themselves. So, suggesting that they just need to be more understanding or those sorts of things. So I think, and these are people who are providing, not only emotional support, but, also helping more around the house. They're, driving the person that they care for to and from appointments and various things, and also organising a lot of what we call life admin. So they were doing quite a lot for the person that they're caring for, irrespective of whether they identified as a carer or not. And I think certainly that, you know, having that sense of self-compassion, so being kind to oneself and, you know, having a sense of shared or common humanity. So it's not just me and, you know, feeling isolated, as well as being mindful around what's happening, I think is really important. And I think that's certainly an opportunity for a lot of people around, you know, how developing their sense of self-compassion might also build their ongoing resilience and their well-being over time as well.
Now, I know you did a bit of background checking before you started this project. And did you have any oversight of other projects that had done a similar work for people with MS? And how did you think that went?
Yeah, so there was a couple of research studies which I referred to, so both internationally as well as nationally. And what I found was that there was a lot of correlation between what the carers, the people with MS, were telling us through this project, as well as nationally and internationally. So there seems to be kind of a consistency, not only within Australia, but also, you know, globally in terms of the research I could identify.
And so you've had the opportunity. We took lots of your wonderful work and put it together in a carers strategy. So do you think that what we've put together has really captured the themes that you found and really really brought that to life?
Absolutely. So I think what you've done an amazing job of translating, you know, what we were told by the carers into looking at developing those focus areas that you've included. Information and support services and MS specific education was one of the key themes that arose for carers, and the opportunity to, you know, call someone, so to have someone that they really felt was on their side. And I know that you've incorporated that through the key worker carer champions, and also, you know, having those centralized records. So when carers do make contact with MS Plus, you know, they're not telling their story over and over again. And I know that was really important for them, as well as accessing resources. So your focus area number 2 was an understanding person to talk to. And this really goes back to what I was saying earlier on around, you know, a lot of carers not having the social supports and not feeling like they have a person that they can really rely on, that will listen, that can understand. Respite outings and retreats were very much desired by the carers, as well as assistance financially and employment support. And that goes back to what I was saying before around, you know, being a carer of MS, having a big impact on people's work participation and opportunity. And of course, you've got advocacy and support for navigating the service system. And we know that the service system, whether it's the disability service system or the aged care service system, depending on the age of the carer and the person with MS, you know, can be incredibly complex for people. So I think you've done an amazing job in terms of creating those focus areas and those strategies.
Well, we look forward. We very much look forward to making sure that what we deliver adds value and really meets those needs in the best way that we can. Bridie, you've been involved in this process all along. So we've just Linda and I have just had a lovely opportunity to chat about that. What's your sort of, and I'll hand over to Kim to also ask you some questions, but how do you feel about how the strategies come together? And I guess does the themes in it really reflect your lived experience of it as well too?
Absolutely. And actually felt like, Linda, you were actually outlining everything that I would potentially sort of talk about, and I'll probably reinforce when I have a bit of a chat in a minute. I think no one really understands what a carer is doing, feels, or is going through other than a carer themselves. And I think when you're dealing with a specific disease, with specific challenges, it's just crucial that you've got people that you can relate to and feel comfortable talking with and feel safe with. And I think this is just the most amazing development for the organisation in moving forward. And I've been really excited to be a part of, answering the questions and a part of sort of developing part of this strategy, and really look forward to seeing where it goes.
And you can hold us accountable, Bridie.
Absolutely. Oh, no, it is really exciting. It is really exciting.
Kim is going to talk to you a little bit more. So Kim does a lot of work with our carers peer support group, and Kim's really been involved in helping us talk to the carers, and just so Kim adds her insights to it, insights into everything that we do, just from Kim's many years of working with carers. So I'll hand over to you and Kim to have a little chat.
Thank you. Also, I think it's been great looking at the carers' stories on our website, and they highlight that it can be a really rewarding experience being a carer, but at the same time, it can be quite challenging. And I wondered, Bridie, if you don't mind sharing perhaps some of the challenges you've faced as a carer supporting your husband with MS.
Sure. So my husband was diagnosed back in 1999, and there were sort of a lot of challenges back then because there wasn't a lot of in the way of treatments, or I really didn't know anything about MS except for the readathon and seeing the odd person in a wheelchair, having no idea there was all sorts of varieties of things that can happen within this disease. And then I guess the first challenge was, oh, I'm being called a carer. What does that actually mean? And coming to terms with the fact that a carer can be as simple as increased amount of having to drive, taking over the power tool, taking over the finances, as you said, just simple things that you don't think about, that sort of put you into that position. But all of that said, the biggest thing that I have challenged with, and as Linda mentioned, is guilt. So, and particularly around giving myself permission to have time out and time away. So, you sort of sit there and you leave your husband at home who's got limited abilities to do things. Is it fair that I go out and actually have a bit of fun and enjoy a bit of life, or have that time away when he's not? So that's probably one of the biggest challenges, and I don't think it's a challenge that just goes away. It is something that continues and changes with the way the person that you're living with changes as well. So there's always going to be a part of element of that.
So it sounds like, Bridie, at times it's hard to look after you. Focusing on your own self-care has been really challenging at times.
Absolutely. And especially if you're one of these people, like I guess, and a lot of people say it, you're a caregiver, you're a giver, and it's very hard to take and step back and put yourself first when you're always, putting other people first. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate to that are watching.
Absolutely. And what have you found most helpful, Bridie, as a carer? What are some of the things that have been most helpful, and for other carers to perhaps tap into?
Absolutely. So talking to other carers, absolutely. It's really important to keep your own battery charged. So if I feel like I'm going into the red, I've got to do something to charge it, or I'm going to be useless. And it's accepting that I've got my own set of grief and loss with the diagnosis of this disease, because the person that's diagnosed with it has got their own grief and loss. But as a family and as a carer and somebody who loves this person has their own set of grief and loss. So it's accepting that and talking to someone about it. Also engaging in activities that require commitment from me. So that means that I do have to go out and I do have to do things that are for me, but it's an ongoing thing. So keeping that going, maintaining friendships, really important, and keeping a really good work-life balance. So trying to keep some sort of normality in your life, knowing that you've got another hat to put on when you sort of come back in that door. Yeah, so if anything is just recognizing that it's okay to have your own challenges and reaching out and getting some help to support that and some strategies to manage them.
That's great, Bridie. Is there anything you would have done differently, or is that really the missing piece to perhaps get help earlier, get support earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, accept that my role's changed, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. You're still a wife, you're still a mother, you're still everything else, but you've got this caring role as well. So accept that's now a part of it. But one of the things that I probably would have done to really pull the family unit together and sort of get everything up and on board is have this authenticity with conversations and setting up boundaries. So getting some help earlier, how to do that, but how to do it so that I feel okay and he understands. So that's a really big thing. And the other thing that I probably would have done in seeking that help is learning strategies. Stop, put myself into his shoes or the person that you're caring for, have an understanding of the disease and why they might be behaving that way, and thinking before you speak or act. Um, it's very hard to do that in the moment when you're really tired yourself and you're really fatigued and you've got a family to run as well as caring for somebody. But I think that is really important, and also accepting that it's absolutely vital for self-care and enjoying your own life. And I guess that goes back to keeping your battery charged, because once you've let that discharge, it's so hard to pick yourself back up and keep going.
Such important
Mm.
messages, Bridie. Is there
Yeah.
anything in particular that you're looking forward to that's come out of the carers strategy? Any action in particular that
uh,
you're looking forward to?
Absolutely. Time out with other carers, particularly carers of people with MS. So you can talk about anything, say anything. You can swear, you can say, oh, they've done this again or whatever, but you're not judged and you're genuinely understood. And you actually feel safe to share the highs and the lows. And, everybody in a normal life has highs and lows, but you've got this little extra challenge on the side. And I think it's really, I am really looking forward to being able to do that. Now, whether that's just, in little short bursts or actually having a bit of time away with them and things like that, it's just invaluable. Yeah. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Great.
And really hanging out to see where all this goes.
Thanks, Bridie. And I guess for carers that are listening, please reach out if you'd like to talk to another carer and be connected and have that safe space that Bridie's talking about. Please ring MS Plus Connect, because there are carers that we can connect you in with. Thanks so much, Bridie.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Bridie, it sounds like you we're talking about a lot about the need to sort of have to make regular your bucket filling, battery filling or bucket filling, but to make it sort of before you run out of steam, and that you need, like I really heard that you were saying for you that it was so important to do something regularly, like to make sure that it was that the new routines that you have to take on, and loss of your old routine is such a big loss, but the new routine has to build in something that you do that's regular for you. And I think that's really such an important thing that you talked about then, that it can't just be one grand thing once a year. It needs to be something that you regularly do to be able to put back into your battery or bucket, whichever one you want to talk about it. And Linda, you talked about that need for self-compassion, that need for self-compassion, and that regular reminder that you're getting that little bit of self-compassion, that little bit of time to recharge. And I think that Kim, I know Kim coordinates some of our carers peer groups, and I think that's their time as well to just, with others, connect with others and say, hey, this is what this is what sort of, this is a bit of a time for us in this group. And it doesn't matter what type of care you're giving, because because you inevitably have to change your role, which means changing your routine, which means changing all those things. So thanks for sharing that, because I think it's such an important, it's such an important thing to capture, and also how you talked about guilt, and that must come with a need to learn to forgive as yourself as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's also another thing that must be something really challenging. And so thank you for highlighting that. Even just to have that acknowledged, I think, is such a huge thing to say. You will probably feel guilty, and that's how it is, and you need to learn to forgive yourself as well. Forgive yourself when you don't do everything 100% right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what I heard too, Bridie, was around what they're calling ambiguous loss or ambiguous grief. When we're perhaps, caring for someone where the relationship has changed. So the person is still existing, we're still in that relationship, but they've changed in some way, whether it's due to things like MS or dementia or, addiction, or mental illness. And I think that's a really important piece around, how do we deal with that sense of loss? Because I don't think it's often acknowledged or acknowledged more broadly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, really important, I think, to acknowledge that it's okay to have these feelings, that it is okay, but it's how you deal with it and what you deal with it, and what you do with it can be really, really important. And Jodi, when you were saying, having something to commit to, the other side of that is I find that when someone's cognition is affected and they're very set on routine and having a routine, if you, like for me, putting up on the calendar that on Tuesday night and Sunday afternoon I've got choir, then they know that that's a part of your routine and you've committed to that. So it sort of fits in with the calendar and sort of fits in with that general routine, but it's actually time for you. So if you can find something that you can really just let go and just be yourself for a few hours, it's amazing, really good for you.
And I guess that helps you to be more responsive, Bridie, as you said, be more centered and able to keep your bucket full.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So, Jodi, I'm curious, when will we start seeing some of these strategies rolling out and these activities? So what can the carers expect around when some of these great initiatives get up and running?
Thanks, Linda. Yes, so we have as part of the strategy, we've put timeframes around when we expect to be able to deliver on some of the different focus areas that we have. So we are introducing a new key worker model role in the very near future, before the end of the year. So stay tuned for that information about that. But that will involve having that concept of a champion of carers, and I think that means that there's a single point that has that resource bucket. There's lots, so that everyone in our organisation, when they speak to carers, knows who to speak to. Because it's, I often say to my kids, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so having someone who knows a whole lot about carers, and so that concept is that we've already initiated that concept of creating a single record for the carers, and that sort of means that they will have their information will be stored so that they have that there. The other things that we're already having place family camps. We've got one coming up in November in Victoria, in Phillip Island. That's full now, but we will, they come around in every state once a year, and that's actually time out for carers as well too. And this time in this camp, we've put a few extra things in for carers on the back of this strategy to think about what they might need as well too. And then the other deliverables, as I said, will be spread throughout the time, and we will be continuing to engage in our carers reference group to make sure that when we develop new ideas and come up with concepts of how we might like to implement something like the timeout, a refuel program that we want to deliver, how that's going to be able to give the most opportunities to the most carers, when the most diverse groups of carers. So we really want to be able to open it up so it's something that we can sustain and deliver over a long period and give opportunity to lots of people. So hopefully all those things, I said, we'll keep our carers reference group engaged, so that we make sure that we also evaluate what we do, so that it comes out, so that it's effective and useful for people as well too. So we know that online resources and information is really important, but just as important is that someone to talk to. And I think we've just heard that really loud and clear today, that you know, reading information is great, but having someone who understands, who knows what to talk to, who knows you as well, and who knows and you know, we often check in on the person with MS, and now we have also put in a box that says, have you checked in with the carer, when we do regular check-ins, so that they're acknowledged as part of the whole team. So thank you. And thank you, Linda, for all the work you've done. Thank you, Kim and Bridie, for coming today. And Bridie, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us and all that you've done. I would reiterate Kim's hint at looking at our website and Facebook and Instagram pages. They have some beautiful stories from carers that they've shared this week through National Carers Week. It is a week that we all acknowledge the incredible value of the support crew around people, and the stories are friends and partners and all sorts of different carers talking about that too. So if anyone has any questions, if anyone has any queries or concerns, if this has brought up any issues for you today, please contact MS Connect, MS Plus Connect. They're there for you. You can contact them via the phone or through our website as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.